All right. Hi, everybody. This is Jessica, Jill, and Andrea from Empire Charter Consultants. Today, we are talking about authorizing. It's actually been a long time since the three of us have been on a call together. And first, it's just really nice to see you guys. But also, we wanted to have this conversation together for a while. This is just going to be an unfiltered, casual, off the cuff, candid conversation about authorizing in New York State, which we've been talking about behind the scenes quite a bit with each other and with other people outside the organization. So I'm really just moderating today to hear what Jill and Andrea have to say. We're going to start a little bit with some recent conversations that we had about authorizing via SUNY and some of Jill's thoughts. We've been really grappling with what we share publicly and what we don't. And so, Jill, let's start with the most recent conversation that we've all been having internally about authorizing and where you are unfiltered and how sometimes you feel like you have to be reined in, but we're not sure that's the right way to be because we always keep kids at the center of our conversations and sort of unwritten mission.
So, I unfiltered is such a good word for me. But everyone should know I have stopgaps in place, and their names are Andrea and Jess. When I'm about to push something to the limit, Andrea will very politely call me and be like, you know what, maybe we should think of doing A, B, and C. God help the person who ticks Andrea off where she agrees that I should just go chill on someone. So a lot of my stuff is less unfiltered and just super honest. And we have a lot of people in the charter school world who struggle with direct honesty. And I don't know why. I don't understand why transparency is such a problem. And both of you know this. I've had people send me text or email saying, do you think it really helps the charter school movement when you call out SUNY or when you call out somebody in the movement? And the truth is, we have not lost focus in any life cycle we have been in the charter school world. How does this policy help kids? How does this help any child who wants to attend a charter school? And if you can't justify it, then why shouldn't we call it out? What is the bad part about calling things out exactly the way they're happening? And I think I've often struggled with, this makes so much sense to me for us to just be honest. And part of this is I did a vlog on SUNY's last Committee on Charter Schools meeting, and Andrea and Jess both have it and they watched it. And before we post it, there has to be an explanation of how we got here. And how we got here is this really horrible road in bureaucracy. And where SUNY used to be the more favorable authorizer, their policies don't actually help all schools. And that seems like such a sweeping statement to me, right? But it's really not. Look at how they make decisions. Andrea made a comment, I think it was yesterday on the phone, I don't even know who we were talking to, where she said, we can't even use their standards anymore as a goalpost because it differentiates so much. Like an 8% school gets expansion and 5-year renewal, and a 36 percentile school was shut down. Like, so why shouldn't that just come out unfiltered? Andrea, you look pained. I'm very sorry.
No, I'm not pained. Yeah, I think that there's value in transparency. I don't think that anyone should be afraid of transparent conversations and opinions about whether policy decisions or just trends are helpful or unhelpful for the kids. I think that all of us should always keep the students and families at the center of all of the conversations. And with that said, shouldn't be afraid of transparency, shouldn't be afraid of differing opinions. And I think what's interesting about it is that with many people, they really do value your unfiltered opinions and your unfiltered views. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to agree with all of them. And I think we have a huge network of friends and supporters and colleagues that absolutely view it that way and will engage with you and say, like, loved it. Every once in a while, someone's like, didn't love it. Here's where I think you got it wrong. We're grown-ups. We can have those conversations. It's okay. And then there's a smaller but somewhat vocal group of folks who are like, you shouldn't say that out loud. You shouldn't say it. Like, just, it's scary to have this much honesty and transparency in the public dialogue. And I think that that is something that we're trying to be sensitive to, but also kind of fundamentally don't agree that we should be keeping some of the policy decisions secret, off the record. I mean, they're not even really off the record, right? I think we would want to also emphasize that any of the public blogs or videos typically are just based on publicly accessible materials, publicly documented decisions made by policymakers, to some extent, maybe legislators, if we're talking about a piece of legislation or a pending bill. We're not like generating fiction. We're saying like, hey, so-and-so just did this. What do you think? And we'll share our opinions of what we think. So I don't know if that is helpful to the conversation. I feel like that was very rambly of an answer, but I guess my main points are transparency matters. I think there's value to unfiltered opinions. I think the overwhelming majority of the folks that we know appreciate those unfiltered opinions, but that doesn't mean they have to agree with them. And then I think for anyone who's worried about saying the quiet part out loud, my message would be, we're obviously not intending to make anyone uncomfortable, but we, again, because we see the value in transparency, because we see the value in really honest conversations and continuous improvement, that's what this is all about. It's all about getting better each and every day for the sake of the students.
Can I add just?
Yeah, and that goes to Jill. Yeah, that goes to Jill, your point about you're not generating content. You've said that before. So can you speak to that a little bit? You are just reporting on what people are what the actions and words are that are out there.
We are not creating anything. We're literally pulling from their documents. We're pulling from their meetings. And what we're doing is, but here's what they didn't say, right? Like that's always kind of the big jump. And I'm going to give you an example. There are a number of schools that were chartered under SUNY that have not yet opened. Here we are having the legislative fight of everyone's life in the charter school movement to get more schools in New York City. How do we, with a straight face, say we need more schools when there's 2 Excel, I think, 2 Explore, whatever they are, that have been chartered for over a dozen years, I think, if not more, that SUNY pulled away that they haven't given out. You have the Success Network schools, and you have at least one AF school and an Uncommon school. So if we're saying we can give out a charter that's we can have a school sit on a charter that's a decade old, I don't understand how we can have the same argument of we need more charters in New York City. Open the ones that we have. I understand politics. But we're affecting students with our politics. The greatest gift COVID gave us, other than being sick for months, the greatest gift COVID gave us was it was a time for us to read everything the authorizers were doing. It was really the first time I think we've had any kind of big time blocks where we could just sit and read reports. And I remembered when I was doing, it was last March, not this past March, we were doing the memo on a SUNY meeting, and I was struggling. And Andrea's like, you know, what's going on? Where are you struggling? But I showed her, like, this school is a financial nightmare, had no problems getting renewed. This school was a financial nightmare, got shut down. So where are these discrepancies? Or this school was a financial nightmare and got put on probation. This school wasn't put on public probation. So why isn't there consistency into authorizing? And listen, SUNY does make it easier. To their credit, they put everything in their reports. But if you just read the whole report, you would see what we see. And just because you like SUNY as an authorizer, and I would say out of both authorizers, at least you can at least get 5 years renewal with SUNY, and you can't with SED. SUNY puts everything in the reports, but doesn't like when anybody makes them public. Right? The reports are already public. All you have to do is read them. All we are doing is going in and saying, hey, there's this discrepancy. There's this discrepancy. Why does this exist? So that's actually during COVID. That was a lot of the reading I did. It was months and months. So sometimes I struggle with my own unfilteredness. I know that's not a word. I just made it up. Unfilteredness. Make sure we use it in Scrabble. But the truth is, I feel like we're not helping anyone. And it's not just the authorizers, right? So people who are involved in the charter school movement at any level are not calling out these practices. I'm not saying success schools are not a viable choice for families. I'm not saying AF or uncommon or explore. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if they are, then open them. But the kids who would have attended a success school are now 12 years old, which doesn't help them. So what we're saying is we were simply okay to let these groups of students who were promised a seat here or thought they would go here, we are okay with them going to a failing school. And I'm telling you, I'm not okay with that. And if that's an unfiltered truth, I don't care. What we're doing is we are telling kids to go back to a district rather than a school that made a promise to them, because we didn't keep the promise of opening that school. And I find that disgusting. Sorry.
Sorry, I froze for a second, so I'm not sure if I missed this point being made, but I did hear the crux of it. And two things. The charter schools that have been chartered but haven't opened, we all know, have also been latched onto by charter school opponents as an argument as to why we don't need any additional charters. So that's damaging to the movement. I would say more damaging than just being honest. But also talk to us a little bit about the people within the movement who say, hey, don't talk about that. Don't. It's not helpful to the movement when you say these things. What's driving that on their end, do you think? And how would you respond?
I would like to throw this question to Andrea Rogers-Barry because I have nothing to say that is not unfiltered.
I think that there are many people who already know. So while I can appreciate that there are some folks who feel hesitant about knowing that ECC or Jill are sharing an opinion, it's all public documents. There are people who monitor this stuff separate and apart from us. And because there is a public decision-making process, none of this is really a secret. So I think that sometimes it seems like there are folks who are worried that because we say it, it's suddenly like revealing, a hidden truth. I would say none of this is hidden. Like it's on the website. The videos are live streamed. Like it's all out there anyway. So I think that I would hope that no one would think, we're revealing confidential information. We're talking about public officials making public decisions. So I think, to the extent that we should not talk about it, it's silly to me. Like this is public stuff.
So I'm going to add something unfiltered, but I kind of filtered it before I'm going to say these words, just so you know. I'm going to kind of filter it. The truth is you would be hard pressed to find someone who has been in this work as long as I have been, who doesn't see how it affects students, right? So we can all sit around and say, calling it out is not good for the movement. Well, I don't know how not calling it out is good for the movement. I have literally dedicated 24 years to the charter school movement, and I didn't do it to watch kids not have a school to go to. Do I think we should have no cap in New York State? Of course I think that. But equally, how do I say that when we have schools that just haven't opened? So if we know somebody's not going to open a school, take their charter when they're ready to open, let them reapply. You've already, listen, let SUNY do to these groups what they did to all of their pending charters, which is you can reapply. And then once you reapply, we're going to ask you for information. But think of this. Don't you believe the census data has changed from 12 years ago? So kids who may have gone, like, demographics in entire cities in New York City have changed. How do we with a straight face say those needs are the same in the community? I'm not saying they're all high performing schools, but people will say things because there's a fear of we're going to lose SUNY as an authorizer. Valid concern. And by the way, that is the thing that has kept us in check, right? We're going to lose SUNY as an authorizer. We agree SUNY should exist. We 1,000,000,000% believe SUNY needs to exist as an authorizer. But then part of the authorizing is ensuring your schools actually open. Open the schools, that give out the Explore charters. Once that happens, the argument for more charter schools is an easier argument to have than us as a state just sitting on charters, if that all makes sense. But by the way, people also do it because they have contracts with people. So the merit,
Is there any merit?
Sure, of course there is. We certainly don't want to lose SUNY, but equally, we need to hold everyone equally accountable. And we can't say it's the authorizer's job to hold schools accountable while no one holds the authorizers accountable. I mean, that's not real accountability. Real accountability is holding everyone equally accountable. Do I think other schools would have been able to sit on a charter unopened for 10 years? Listen, no, right? And that drives politics. So there is some merit to it. We certainly don't want to hurt SUNY, but equally, all we're doing is regurgitating what they've put out there. They just don't do it as vocally as we do. So yes, there's some merit, but it's not enough to stop me.
So 2 questions, and if I freeze, just you guys keep going and we can edit out the freezing. If SUNY was to listen to this video, would you, I assume I know some things that you would say to them, but if SUNY officials were listening, what would you tell them? And secondarily, what do you say when someone says to you, like, please don't say that? Like,
they're listening, right? Like, we know they're listening. That's the problem. We know they're listening. And I don't know how you can listen to somebody say this is unacceptable 10, 20, 30 times and not be really self-reflective of how something's hurting the movement. And it's hurting the movement. SUNY is hurting the movement by not making schools open. That's it.
Is there anyone else in New York State that is trying to be a watchdog for the authorizers? Is there anyone else that you talk to in conversations that tries to keep them in check?
No, but I can tell you that a lot of schools call us to say, can you look into this? This includes like schools that we don't directly work for. But for every, let's put it this way, for every email we send out where I might receive a text saying, you know, have you ever thought about how you're affecting SUNY schools? We get equal amount, or we get, more emails saying, thank you for saying this. So I think this is what people need to be aware of. We hear more about schools saying we're afraid of repercussions from either authorizer than people saying they disagree with us. So people will write me, I agree with you, can't put that in public because afraid that will blow back on us. But what does that say? Right? But what does that say about the movement if we feel we can't just speak about whatever the truth is? And that worries me. Listen, SED, they're their own nightmare, right? Like, you guys both listened to the regents meeting. I stopped when I watched one of the regents' wife walk by in her pajamas. That's when I checked out, right? But SUNY, you know, we say they're one of the top authorizers in the country, right? Their highest performing schools, the highest performing schools in the country are in their portfolio. Nobody can take that away from them. However, it doesn't mean they're not accountable for the schools that aren't open or consistency in accountability across their schools. They're not consistent with it. All anyone has to do is read their reports. So asking me to not point out the obvious just seems like, you know, a really unintelligent thing to do.
I think
And
it's
when you,
also important, sorry, Jess, I would just add, I also think it's important that we state that we know it's a hard job. Like, we understand Jill was literally an authorizer for a number of years with SUNY. We understand that it's part art, part science. Um, you know, sometimes it feels like it's part science fiction, unfortunately, or, just I think that, like, we get that it's hard, and I think that's partly why it's important to be able to have honest and public conversations, and for folks to be able to say, yeah, like, we're going to do better, or we're going to think about this differently, or we can't even promise we're going to do anything different, but we're glad that we have these points of view to at least, help us, like, push our own thinking internally. um we're in a place where we're lucky that we get to have these kinds of conversations. We're lucky right now that we do have an somewhat independent authorizer. I think that one of the things that's also really sad is that authorizing underneath the Board of Regents and the State Ed Department, in my opinion, has gotten to be so unpredictable and so, I don't know what the right word is. I'm struggling to find the right word. I think that they are performing so poorly as an authorizer that it's, like, almost hard to even criticize, because it's like, where do you even start? And I think so many schools feel such exhaustion from inconsistencies in the authorizing environment, from, just a whole host of problems. I mean, we could talk for hours about it. Again, in my opinion, I think that the regents and SUNY are really struggling to be an effective authorizer. And I wish that they would be open to conversations about how to improve. I can always hope, right?
well, and you said before that you didn't want that when people don't agree with us, we can take it. We're adults. You really wish that authorizers who are listening wouldn't be taking this so personally. It's that when you're talking about the unpredictability for schools, they may look to us to recap meetings and pick up on trends, or just see, like, generally where the direction of the authorizers. But if it's so inconsistent and unpredictable, there really is a more difficult roadmap, especially if the authorizers don't abide by their own set of metrics for renewals. They're left really worrying so much about this, and I think it does take away from their primary job. And also, just to touch on something that Jill said, something that about someone outside of our organization talking about hurting SUNY schools. We work with SUNY schools. We want them to succeed. We work with both SUNY and SED schools. We want them all to succeed. I think that when we're talking, or especially you guys are talking about being transparent, and the authors, it's because we care about those schools. We never want to harm them. But the movement really is going to be, if schools have no idea what to expect with their authorizer, and that unpredictability that Andrea was just discussing. And Jill, I know you have a point you want to make.
So I think what's interesting is school leaders who have pushback have said that's not been our experience. And I'm like, I'm so happy to hear that's not your experience, but it is other schools' experience. But I would say about a year ago, something happened, and Andrea and I were kind of like, this doesn't seem right. And so we called somebody else in the charter school world and we explained to her what was going on. And she just kind of was like, I don't think it's a big deal. I think you guys, like, I think you're overthinking this. But Andrea and I felt like we weren't overthinking it, right? So, but when this person said to us, and it's somebody we both respect, which, is hard to find, quite frankly, because we all know my respect level wanes out after a few negative comments. But it's somebody we both respected. And she was like, I don't see it's a big deal. About 3 days later, she calls us and gets us both on the phone. And she's like, I see why it's a big deal. Right. And so sometimes it's just we give information and then other people are looking at it like, oh, this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen. But then it just makes them super aware of when an authorizer is in their school. It doesn't matter which authorizer. of common language they learn when a visit, or they've heard when a visit is going awry, right? Like, we didn't see this, or whatever the question is. But sometimes people will disagree, and then something happens and they're like, so we were prepared for this only because we read this post, and that's what we want. We want people to just be super aware. And the other piece is, you can question, look, maybe not SED, but you can question SUNY. You can tell them you disagree with them. SED, you can tell them, but they've had so much staff turnover. If you tell somebody next week, that person's not going to be there in another month, so it won't really matter. But when did schools feel like they couldn't push back on an authorizer? When did that happen? When did authorizers become this bureaucracy rather than what they were supposed to be, which is partners in educational excellence? So why are schools so afraid, if there's something in a report, to just simply say, this isn't true? Because an SED is never going to change their reports. I think all three of us can agree. We watch the Regents meetings. It wouldn't matter how much evidence a school has with SED. But when did SUNY become so bureaucratic that schools feel they can't push back, even on the smallest thing, that they feel they can't push back? And both authorizers tout these great relationships, and they may very well have them with a certain number of schools, but schools are constantly on high alert for what they're going to be dinged on, right? We know a school that was put on probation under SUNY without any advance warning. They found out in the newspaper. Is that good authorizing? Right? Like, why would that have happened? And nobody apologized. Nobody said, hey, we should have done this. Like, there was nothing, because they're SUNY. We can shut you down. That's a real fear with schools. If we don't do what they say, they can shut us down. Is that really what we want from our authorizers? Because it's not what I signed up for at all.
So I think we agreed from day one that we could disagree, but to the maximum extent possible, like, we're going to continue to disagree respectfully and maintain, like, it seems silly to say, but like, as a sort of a professional value, when we went into this work, we knew that we had to be able to have that push and pull. And what I think is so interesting is that, like, so many times over the past few years, people have said, like, well, don't you and Jill just agree on everything? No, like, I mean, we have a lot of the same thoughts and feelings and opinions on things, but we absolutely have many moments on a range of topics where we see things from different sides. And what I think is so fascinating about it is, like, it's never contentious. It's always like, all right, tell me more about what you're thinking when you say that. Tell me why you're feeling that way. And like, sometimes one of us will be like, yeah, I think I'm leaning toward your way now. And other times we're like, yeah, we're just gonna kind of be in different camps on this one. And it's always okay, because again, like, we just try to treat it as, this is hard work, this is complex work, and the answer, there may not be a very clear yes or no answer, but as long as really, thoughtful people are grappling with trying to do the right things and trying to get it right, then hopefully at the end of the day, we're doing our best for the people that matter the most, which is the students, the families, the staff in those schools. So I think that that's a really important, just general, like, dynamic that we have. We can absolutely bounce things around, and sometimes we'll say to each other, all right, well, we both agree on this, so let's play devil's advocate with each other. Let's fire questions at each other as if we didn't agree, just to, like, make sure that we're actually examining it from enough angles, that we're being really thoughtful about it. We definitely always try to think about whether things that we do or say are going to help, hurt, or be neutral for the schools that we work with. I think we're humans, we're human beings. We want to make sure that we are delivering supports that people find useful. But at the end of the day, like, we are actually always trying to do what's right, ultimately, again, for those students. And so there are times where we have said, we think that the folks will be okay with this, but we could see how maybe there are some who won't be, but we still feel it's really important to say it. So we will.
So Andrea and I have disagreed on things from school closings, right, to, right, like what goes in our memos. I think what people are unaware of, and they should be super aware of, is there are times I write something and Andrea's like, wait, they did A, B, and C, and she makes it like, it might have my name on it, but she just added 20 things that she felt, right, like I missed, and I'm okay with that. And she'll give it a larger context. So I go first with what pieces do we agree on? I think, and as both of you know, like we were the only people who spoke up about urban dub charter school and racism. And the number of texts I received from people saying, don't go there, like don't show public support. Well, how does that help the charter school movement, right? So we were all really honest with each other on how it could affect us, but we did it because it was the right thing. But equally, there have been videos I've made or things I've written that Andrea's like, let's just put this on the shelf. And I know what she's saying. It's either I'm coming across as very angry and I need to take a step back and a breath, which is the right thing to do. And normally I don't revisit it. She's been very right about that. Like normally I just don't revisit it. But if I keep revisiting it, it like clicks something in Andrea's head up, then we have to find a different way to get this message across. It's still the same messaging. It's just Andrea up. And
Well,
so,
I think, but you do that for me too. Like, I think we both help each other define what it is that's actually gotten that fire going in our gut. And that's a benefit, right? I think you need to work with people that will push your thinking. And I think, Jess, you do that for us too, in a lot of ways. Like, there are many times where you'll be editing something and you'll be like, but what are you really trying to say here? And it helps. I mean, I think again, because it's hard work and because it's messy work, sometimes we think we're making a point and it's not coming through clearly, or sometimes we lead with a point that really isn't the thing that we're trying to call attention to. And so I think we all help each other try to like grow that side of what are we thinking? What are we trying to communicate? Are we doing it the way that we think we should be? And I will say, I think that like I come across as very sort of, technical and dry, and Jill comes across as very like passionate and like leads with her heart. And I think that what I've learned a lot over the years is that when my initial gut reaction is like, "Ooh, I don't know if you should say that," usually that's not the right reaction. And so I will actually say to Jill, like I do have some initial hesitation, but I'm not sure I'm right about that. Like, I think maybe you do need to just go with your gut on this and go and, hit the gas pedal on that. So I'm going to mix as many metaphors in as I can right now.
as
But
long as
yeah,
not
I think that like Jill's gut reactions sometimes really distill down the issues in a very digestible way. And that's a good thing.
And let's just be honest, we're not helping kids if we don't say it. Like I didn't get into this work to be a millionaire, one, but that would be nice in case somebody's got $1 million they want to throw our way. Andrea and I would be very happy with that. Jess, we could all, just write whatever we wanted without concern. I think that at the end of the day, I didn't get into this to be about the adults. I got into it because we're supposed to do right by kids and we made a promise to families. And so if I need a gut check, well, Andrea and I have had hysterical conversations, like just like what the hell just happened conversations, right? Where we're just entirely blindsided by something. But equally, it's like, well, what is the message? Andrea's very good about saying, but what is it that you're trying to convey? Okay, can we do it this way? I can't remember any time where I was just like, no, this is it. Like, this is what we have to do. I think
you usually send those tweets before you ask.
I usually send tweets because I can be passive aggressive too. Listen, I think it's hard for me when people that I used to really respect send me texts that say, in my opinion, right? And then they give me their opinion and they say, that's all I have to say about it, which tells me you don't respect where I'm coming from. So I can go back and forth with you, Jess. I can go back and forth with Andrea. I can go back and forth with school leaders. I don't work with any school leader that I cannot go back and forth with and hold my own. But at the end of this, are we doing what's best for families? And what I see is we now have 2 authorizers who are in essence superintendents of districts. And I had an interview with a woman in another state, in Maryland, and she called autonomy directed autonomy. And Andrea and I were like, yes, right? Like somebody, a school leader, understood that there's no real autonomy in charter schools. The authorizer is directing you on your behavior and what you need and what it should look like and why it should look like that. That wasn't the intent of the charter school movement. Yes, kids learning and kids being safe, absolutely. We're going to be better than the district schools. We're going to meet state standards. That's it. That's it. If we're gonna, then you guys can like rail on Florida all you want, and mostly I agree with you. But their chartering world and their choice in education, right? If you're a high performing school, you're an A school, you get a 10-year renewal. If you're a B school, you get a 5-year renewal. But if you're a C, D, F school, then you get a short-term renewal and probation. So it's like, right, if you've proven yourself to be excellent, you get a 10-year renewal. And New York has to start thinking in other ways. And by the way, I'm a firm believer in 3 authorizers, or as many authorizers as we can have in a state.
And can we just say that schools should have the ability to change authorizers? I don't agree that like a school should feel that anytime they disagree with anything, they should just go jump to the next authorizer and just constantly play ping pong. Like, I don't think any of us really want to live in that world. But I do think that there needs to be a mechanism for when a school is in a situation where the authorizing environment really isn't supportive, really isn't helping them accomplish their mission and their, design, that there needs to be a smart way for them to be able to change. I mean, if everybody else gets a choice, why not? I just think that it also can help kind of recalibrate this power dynamic, which is so heavily tilted at this point toward, like, I won't reiterate the exact point, but yeah, I mean, it's like schools need to be able to have choices. And there are some places where that is the case. And I think that it's, worth a conversation here in New York, even if it's like once every few years, there's a window of time where you can apply to change change authorizers, like something like, let's be creative. How should that work? I don't know if I have the right answer. I know it should be a conversation though.
Carol Ost, who is no longer with the Charter School Association in South Carolina, when she added a 3rd authorizer, national people were not very happy. That's what we had heard. And somebody called her and they said, well, how many more authorizers do you think you should have? And she's like, I don't know, I got 14 more in the pipeline, right? Because she understood that the more bureaucratic authorizers were becoming, we needed a pipeline of schools who held charters available for exactly what they submitted and not this directed autonomy. And so there's a state smaller than New York with a number of charter schools, but there's a state that understood we needed a 3rd authorizer for the status quo, for all the schools who had been treated unfairly with no way of pushing back. You need that 3rd authorizer.
Let's talk for a second, and I'm not sure how much longer people want to listen to us go on, but about we've been talking a lot about the people who say like, don't say that, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. But there are people who will contact you guys and be like, I 100% agree with you, and thank you for taking a stand. Can we talk about that? Because even if some bad authorizing practices don't affect everyone, they do affect enough people that you hear from school leaders. So can you just talk a little bit about that so people know what are some of the other like more positive feedback you get from being transparent and holding the authorizers accountable?
So I think that Jill probably can speak best to this because she has gotten a ton of supportive types of messages. I will say I have heard many times from folks who see like the existential side of these conversations and really do fear that in the long term, if there aren't changes, that the charter, the move, like the whole movement is just kind of going into a place where there's like trouble ahead. So I think that for me, I definitely have heard from folks that are worried about the long-term outlook. I also will say that we hear from schools who will be like, hey, here's an idea of something you should talk about. Hey, here's an idea of like what might be a good blog post, or, a decision that was made. And if honestly we had the funding to all day and write all day, I think that so many of them are great ideas. What's interesting about what we are doing is that we're mostly doing project work. We're mostly just digging in on specific things with schools. And so like we do obviously really watch the trends, and we want to report on the actions that we see. But we're not in a position right now to really be like thought leaders on this, but there's a lack of thought leaders on this right now. And I would love for someone to move into that space and into that role, maybe not on a full-time basis, but on more of a basis than we've been able to. Because again, like I think there's value in the conversations.
It's almost funny to me sometimes when I get something saying, do you think this is a good idea? And then 10 schools have written me like, right on, or I want to be when you grow up, or I wish I could say this out loud, or here's 5 problems I had. Go look at so-and-so's report. They did this to them. There's a certain freedom with just being able to say exactly what's going on to try to help schools. I find that more people are receptive than not to what I'm sending out. And by the way, a lot of the people who aren't receptive don't work in charter schools, right? They're like, have something to do with the charter school movement, but they're not in a school. They're like somebody else, like they're part of something else. And they're like, well, is that really helpful? Actually, yes. And then there's some people who we don't even work with that I'll be like, oh, I'm going to forward them this because I know the last time I spoke with them, and they'll call me and they'll tell me what's going on with them. And we don't share confidential information. And very, very rarely do we say to a school, we want to be able to help you, but we've got to be able to share this piece of information. And we haven't been able to do it. So part of us, it's just listening to people. Like we'll put something out and then we'll hear from a school and they'll be like, here's 20 things SED did to us on the visit. And we can't do anything with that information. And it burns in us, right? We're just like, we've got to find a way to share this story. So maybe it's like listening. So there's a ton of stuff we have never even shared, a ton of stuff. So what we're sharing is filtered. I'm not saying how we share it is always filtered, but what we share is filtered to protect schools, unless a school is like, I don't even care. But if you have a school that's onto I don't even care, we already know that relationship with the authorizer. So I would tell you, more people write me really beautiful email. People send me gifts. Like I will randomly get gifts from a school, and sometimes it's mind blowing to me. They're like, oh, can you send me your address? Like, I want to send you something. Maybe it's just a very weird thing. But also, I think part of that is we have never strayed from the messaging of we're only going to help you because it's best for kids. We're only going to call things out because it's for the betterment of every student who's attending a charter school. We don't just randomly pick on people. There's a very clear reason as to why we are bringing things up. So for me, I've received everything from alcohol to like angels. I have a school that sends me angels. It's not a joke. And so it's very weird to me when I receive something, like I receive thank you notes in the mail. Equally, I receive anonymous letters. Right. Andrea's smiling because she received them too. So mostly it is well received by schools. And in the rare instance when a school says, we have not found this, I'm like, then you should consider yourself lucky. But also they don't pick on you because of A, B, and C. But if you're an independent school, you're looked at in a different way. Either there's consistency and transparency in authorizing, or there isn't. You can't have it both ways. But it's very usually well received. And I know that by the amount of alcohol I've received as a group. A school one time told us that they follow us, but they only call us in when they need heavy hitters. And right, like we are considered the people when you're ready to battle, they bring us in. So a school that may be very quiet and not let us know either way when they have a problem, we're their first call. And I consider that the highest compliment of you're paying attention. I don't expect schools to wave a flag and say we're the best of friends, or that we're in contact, or these are people we've worked with, right? I don't expect that. But at the end of all of this, schools know who is supporting them on a different level, and it is us. And we are the only ones supporting schools from the inside out. You have a way to push back. Excuse me, I have a cold. So we know there are a lot of schools that agree with us, and we just don't hear from them until they have a problem. Then they bring us in, and be guaranteed schools may not like what we say right up until the time they have a problem. And then they're like, oh, I think they've mentioned this before. And then they pick up the phone and call us. So I think that's kind of the highest compliment, though my unfiltered Jill, it's like, right, you don't pay me, so let me send you an invoice first, and then you can have this conversation with me. Or wait, aren't you the person who said this isn't true for your school? Andrea, do you have a thought on that? You don't want to be associated with us. Get in line.
No, I mean, I think, listen, we work with so many great folks, and in New York, but also in other places. And I think we both feel really lucky, and we've not had issues. Like, we've just not had issues of anyone saying like, hey, I'm going to have a problem. If, maybe those folks just don't call us in the first place if they're that worried. I hope that everybody is able to always work with anyone that they find is helpful to them, that they're comfortable with, that they feel like they have that trust relationship with. And we know we're not for everybody, and that's okay. It really is okay. But the people that we have worked with, we've been just really so lucky to work with just so many amazing, great, wonderful people that I feel really, really thankful that, really so thankful. And also unless we're going to grow, we're good. We're good. We're having fun. We're successful. Again, if anyone has just millions laying around and they want to give us millions, we'll take it, and we'll be thought people all day long. But there are organizations designed for that, and let's have them get back to it. Speaking of, one of the future things that we are hoping to talk about is, looking at some of the organizations' thought papers, so for NACSA, they've been writing quite a bit. And so, maybe we'll be able to break down some of the recommendations and suggestions that they're making, and talk about where we see strengths and weaknesses, or maybe where we can add on to help those conversations. When there is a group doing that, we think that's awesome. We hope they continue to get that support and get, funding to be able to keep it up. And, if we're able to join in, then we will.
I think Jess too is that schools rely on us to tell the truth. So if we write something and it makes them feel uncomfortable, or they're like, oh, right. And I think, let's just say this. We know that a lot of SUNY schools knew our relationship prior, right? We have a good relationship with Catherine, but calling out bad policies shouldn't affect schools, and schools shouldn't feel nervous about working with us because we're calling things out. Things only change if we all agree they need to change. And I would say having your name associated with us is not the worst thing in the entire world, but we also know to tread carefully. But I'm just not going to agree with somebody to agree. And our schools would tell you straight out, we have said to schools, but your grades aren't good, right? So they're used to the honesty we bring to the table, which is this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't make sense. Like you as a school, but hands down, understand if you are a school or you're anybody in the charter school movement who doesn't like us and doesn't like us speaking out, we have stayed consistent with our messaging, which is how do these policies and practices help students and families as they go through the charter school world? How do they help? And if they don't, then we are responsible for saying it. Schools know that too, right? These schools are really nuanced. They know they have to have good relationships with their authorizer. However, there will be time when they don't agree with policies or there's a back and forth. It is up to someone to just tell the truth about what's going on in the movement. So if your biggest concern is we're going to tell the truth and that makes you feel uncomfortable, I can't really change that. I would like to, but
Yeah. I also don't think there's any value to hiring a bunch of people to just be yes women, but you wouldn't do that. You just wouldn't pay for that. So anyway, I think that I know I gained a lot of insight from listening to you two today. And I know even when my computer froze, I was still by osmosis, hopefully soaking it up. But we should do more of these because I think they're really interesting. And it's interesting to hear the thought processes that you guys go through, but also to hear where you're coming from and what you hear behind the scenes. It's super interesting. So we're hoping that people will take a listen and let us know what you think. So thanks for the conversation, guys, ladies.
can I give my final thought for a different one?
Yeah.
Schools should not fear repercussions from an authorizer. They just simply shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah. I mean,
so that might not be for this one and we add it to something else, but the reality is
there shouldn't be retaliation.
no.
Right. And it does
Yeah.
worry me. Listen, it worries me when adults feel that they can tell me that my opinion about the charter school world doesn't matter. And if we want to get down to it, I've been one of the longest continually employed in the charter school movement in the entire charter school movement. Right? Everybody else has left the movement and come back at some point. I have not. I have stayed, and I have stayed because I believe in the promise of the charter school movement. And I don't understand other people who are not. And I say that respectfully.